Tonight we are going to look at Parshas Kedoshim. Parshas Kedoshim, as Rashi says, Rov Gufei Torah Tluyim Ba. Many essential principles of the Torah are dependent upon or are incorporated within the short, but as I say, very consequential passage of our Parsha. So I want to start with exploring what Ksav Sofer has to say on the opening passage. So if you're with me in the Art Scroll Chumash, it's on page 656, whatever Chumash you're using, it's Parshas Kedoshim, Vayikra, chapter 19. V'daber Hashem Moshe lemor, daber al kol hadasis bnei Yisrael v'amarta alehem kedoshim tihiyu. You shall be holy. Ki kadosh ani Hashem Elokechem, because I, the Lord your God, am holy. A very famous opening passage, and let's consider, actually, Ksav Sofer has a few variant approaches. I'd like to share with you two of those tonight, as well as hopefully some other insights as well. So he makes it an observation, which I have not seen in other Mefarshim. Probably others have also drawn attention to it. But he points out that at the end of Parshas Shmini, now last week we read Parshas Achrei Mos. Frequently Achrei Mos and Kedoshim are read together, but in any case, the week prior to that was Parshas Shmini. Really, we read Shmini before Pesach, so it seems a bit longer ago than that. But in the sequence of the Torah, we have at the end of Parshas Shmini, actually, I err slightly because we had Tazria Mitzorah in between as well. But at the end of Parshas Shmini, we have there the exhortation about Kedusha, in which the Torah says, V'his kadishtem, you shall sanctify yourselves. If you want to look with me, if you've got the Stone Chumash on page 606, it's the end of Parshas Shmini, and the Torah says there in chapter 11, verse 44, K'ani Hashem Elokechem v'his kadishtem v'hiyisem kedoshim. You shall sanctify yourselves, and you shall become holy. Ki kadosh ani, because I am holy. But then it continues, V'lo sitamu es nafshosichem, and do not defile your souls, M'chol hasheretz harameis al haaretz, with all of the creepy, crawling creatures that perambulate upon the earth. Now that refers to what we would call, what the Torah calls a sheretz, which we would call a lizard or a rodent, probably an opossum or other creatures like that would be in the category of a sheretz, a possum. I'm seeing my sister Shira here, her picture. Nice to see you, Shira. When we grew up in Indiana, so we had raccoons and things like that. Those would be considered probably what the Torah here calls a sheretz, as well as other creatures which are not kosher. The point is that the Torah here in the end of Shmini says, sanctify yourselves. In what way? Because you won't be defiled with all of these, consuming all of these unclean animals. Parshas Shmini, just let me remind you, deals with the what we call kosher and non-kosher species. The Torah normally calls them tameh and tahar, the land animals that you may eat and the ones you may not eat, like a donkey or a horse or a camel or a swine. Of course, those are all forbidden. When the Torah says at the end of Parshas Shmini, V'his kadishtem v'hisem kedoshim, sanctify yourselves and become holy, it's a limited form of holiness that the Torah refers to there. In what way will you be holy? Because relative to the nations of the world, to the rest of mankind, who consume whatever is available to them, whatever creeps or whatever is tasty or whatever offers nutrition or whatever offers protein, whatever they seek, whatever they can access, whatever they can put their hands on, they eat. And of course, that refers to fowl, which is tameh, to fish, which are tameh, to crustaceans, and to shellfish, and all other creatures. And the Torah establishes for the Jewish people food which is kosher and not kosher. Says Ksav Sofer, the Torah emphasizes you'll become holy, but he observes that that holiness is only a relative holiness. That's why we've called our discussion tonight theory of relativity. the Ksav Sofer says that until now in Parshas Shmini, we've seen the exhortation to be holy, but it is a holiness that is a relative holiness compared to the moral laxity, or you could say even depravity of the nations of the world. So the Torah imposes upon the Jewish people a form of holiness, a form of self-restraint. I think I probably mentioned previously, I can't remember exactly when, the story of the young man that we invited home for Shabbos lunch many years ago. And he said he's become a vegetarian. And what are we having for lunch? And I told him I'm not sure what Ruthie is planning, but no doubt there'll be food for you to eat. And he told me, well, he doesn't really want to be a vegetarian. So I said, fine, it's all kosher food. You can eat whatever you like then. And he said, yeah, but he feels guilty because he kind of undertook to be a vegetarian. And the point of that exchange was an insight that I garnered from that kind of exchange, which was that he explained that when he analyzes his decision to become a vegetarian, it was a desire to rise above the impulse of eating whatever comes his way. He felt as if he owes it to himself to conduct his eating habits according to a higher standard, according to some standard of morality that elevates him above the habits of an omnivore. And therefore, he decided to become a vegetarian. But now that he was becoming more religiously aware and more Jewishly attuned and committed, he realized that what he really wants is to keep a kosher diet. He doesn't need the vegetarian diet anymore. That's what Ksav Sofer says over here. That regarding Parshas Shmini, that the Torah says you shall be holy, don't just eat whatever comes your way like other people do, but rather these are the animals you may eat. These are the aquatic creatures you may eat. These are even the insects. Not that we're so fond of eating insects anyway, but as you know, I'm sure the Torah permits eating locusts of certain types that you may eat, others you may not eat. Says Ksav Sofer, now in Parshas Kedoshim, the Torah is going much further, because this, he calls it Kedusha Amitit, true Kedusha, not only relative to the nations of the world, but here it says Kedoshim Tihiyu, and he alludes, he just quotes very briefly what Ramban says. And if you're not familiar with Ramban's comments on this parsha, then by all means, I would encourage you to look it up, whether you've got facility with the Hebrew or with the English. Ramban there has a very important extended comment in which he elaborates on the concept of Kedusha. And he says Kedusha, he really sums it up, if I can encapsulate it in one phrase. Ramban says, Kadesh atzmecha b'mutar lach. Sanctify yourself regarding that which is permissible to you. The Torah forbids certain foods and certain behaviors, and the Torah permits other food and other behavior. But even within the permissible, a person can become, and again, this is another famous phrase of Ramban from that same passage, naval b'rshus haTorah. He can become degenerate with the imprimatur of the Torah. Says Ramban, that's why the Torah says here, Kedoshim, you shall be holy. Don't become self-indulgent to the point of depravity, even within that which the Torah technically allows. But gluttony and overindulgence, a person can become degenerate with the permission of the Torah. And that is what the Torah here seeks to steer us away from, to elevate us, to steer us towards a higher plane of living in which we are not succumbing or not indulging in everything that the Torah does not forbid. A person can embrace it and become indulgent, self-indulgent, and depraved as a result. Kedoshim to you means you shall be holy in an absolute sense, not only in a relative sense. Says Ramban, that is why the Torah here says a beautiful drash, B'hakhel. Take another look, please, at the opening passage, the second pasuk. Daber al kol hadas b'nei Yisrael v'amart alehem. Speak to the entire assembly of the children of Israel. So the Torah in Vayikra and elsewhere, but let's talk about our book of Vayikra, repeatedly has that formula, Daber el b'nei Yisrael v'amart alehem. Speak to the children of Israel and tell them. And as we know, that formula is very familiar. But here, the Torah says, Daber el kol hadas b'nei Yisrael. The Torah here emphasizes quite clearly that this is an assembly of the entire congregation. So actually, for those who are with us on Shabbos, we are going to talk about the penitent and the 4-minute mile. And I have something to share with you then, what Alshicht says about the idea of like the all-embracing nature of this communication, El Kol Adas Ben Yisrael. But Ksav Sofer says something very novel. Says the reason the Torah says El Kol Adas B'nei Israel, he says Behakhel, that the Jewish people were gathered together. He says Nikhalu Yachad Uvagoyim Lo Yischashvu. The remez, the subtle implication of the words El Kol Adas B'nei Israel is all the congregation of Israel to the exclusion of the nations of the world, meaning we're not going to compare you to the nations of the world anymore. In Parshas Shmini, so the greatness of living up to those restrictions is you won't be, prone to that habit of eating whatever is accessible to you. Rather, you will only eat food which is kosher. But here, says Ramban, we are not talking about just relative to others. In some parts of the world, even to this day, they eat dogs and they eat snakes and they eat, other kinds of creatures which probably are not appealing at all to the Western palate. And of course, those are not kosher as well. In many places, they do eat them though. So it's not just that we avoid those kinds of foods compared to other people, but says Ksav Sofer, now you'll be Kedoshim to you. You will be holy in essence. That is to say, not only relative, but you will be elevated because, as Ramban says beautifully, Kadesh atzmecha b'mutar lach. Therein lies Kedusha. That is sanctity, to even exercise restraint regarding that which the Torah permits. Now, I don't want to be preachy, it's not my style, and especially, when I venture into something which I have no credibility in. But the Torah here, he's hinting to the idea that a person should not eat all the kosher food that is available to him, to exercise self-restraint, to exercise self-control, to perhaps eat a certain amount and not to eat everything that is available. It's maybe in addition to the, health benefits, but there's a spiritual benefit as well. A person is exercising his ability to control his desires. That's Kadesh Atzmecha B'mutanach. So that's the first thing I wanted to share with you, is that in Parshas Shmini, you are relatively holy compared to the nations of the world. In Parshas Kedoshim, you are holy be'etzem, because you are living up to that charge, Kadesh Atzmecha B'mutanach. Now, I want to tell you another approach which he advances in another short essay on the same pasuk and on the same turn of phrase. He says that our parsha says, Kedoshim Tihu, Daber al kol adas b'nei Yisrael, ki kadosh ani. Speak to the entire congregation of Israel, you shall be holy because I am holy. Says Ksav Sofer, an interesting idea. There is a form of holiness or pursuit of holiness, which is actually quite intuitively satisfying or intuitively logical, intuitively a valid strategic approach to achieving Kedusha. And not only is it intellectually satisfying or intuitively strategically prudent, but there are many cultures in which the pursuit of holiness is achieved, is advanced by exactly that. What is that? Asceticism. Distancing oneself from interaction with other people. A person who aspires to holiness can logically achieve it more readily if he keeps himself to himself. If he interacts regularly with other people, the influence of the wider society is to bring him down, is to drag him towards religious mediocrity, because that's the influence of the people with whom he interacts. If a person aspires to holiness, so logic would validate the approach of withdrawing from interaction with people. Says Iksav Sofer, don't do it. That's what the Torah is telling us here. Be holy because I am holy. He says, Al tihi kadosh alidei prisha mibnei adam. Don't become holy or don't pursue holiness through distancing yourself, from separating yourself from other people. He says, I'll read a few words that he says, Mashtim nafsho, a person may seek to perfect his own soul, ve'enu mabit ba'acherim, and he doesn't pay attention to other people that will distract him from his quest for personal improvement and refinement. But rather, elemishtadel tovas b'nei adam, a person should exert himself to the benefit of others. Ulhadricham lavodas Hashem, and to lead them in the service of God. Now, this is an idea which Ksav Sofer expresses here in a couple of paragraphs, but his father Chassam Sofer also writes very eloquently and very cogently about the same idea. And other Meforshim do as well. It's just that Ksav Sofer was the eldest son of Chassam Sofer, so it's not surprising that he here echoes an idea, and I've seen it elsewhere in his commentary as well, that his father Chassam Sofer articulated in many places. The idea that a person should not believe or expect or imagine that his pursuit of personal sanctity can, or maybe even should, be accomplished at the expense of an interaction with other people. On the contrary, the way to achieve genuine greatness is to engage with other people, to seek to lead them, to teach them, to inspire them, to be an example to them. And I just want to mention two people in my own life who help me exemplify this. One is my friend and mentor, Rabbi Michael Tversky Zuzan, now known as the Milwaukee Rebbe, someone who, to me, embodies some of the highest expressions of religious aspiration and achievement, but equally, to the very same extent, exceptional Ahavas Yisrael, his concern for others, his sensitivity to others, his desire to benefit others, great and small, is on a par with his own pursuit and his own achievements of personal, religious, exalted aspiration. Another person is Lahavdu ben Chaim L'chaim, my late friend Rabbi Rafi Waxman. Some of you may know him or not to know him. And for me, again, Rabbi Rafi Waxman, sadly no longer with us, also was a Talmid Chacham. He devoted himself to building the yeshiva in Milwaukee, but his love of other people, his concern for other people, his desire to bring benefit to other people was a natural part of who he was. And of course, it contributed to his greatness, far from detracting from it. So he says Iksav Sofer, and this is the meaning when the pasuk goes on to say, Ki kadosh ani, because I am holy. He says, we say in Kedusha, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaos Melech Kol Haaretz Kvodo. Holy, holy, holy is God. Melech Kol Haaretz Kvodo, but the whole world is full of his glory. Hashem's holiness does not mean that Hashem is only in the Shmei Shamayim, in the highest heavens, but rather Melech Chol Haaretz Kevodo. The whole world is filled with his glory. That is to say, the holiness of Hashem, Kavayochol, the Chazal say that, we have to somehow seek to emulate Hashem in holiness, which much has been written about how that can be achieved. What is the meaning of such an exhortation? But Ksav Sofer says that Kadosh, 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 God's holiness does not prevent him from taking an interest in the well-being of people. He says, Mashkiach al hatachtonim lahativ lahem. He takes an interest in the lower realms, the human beings as well, probably the animal kingdom equally, lahativ lahem, to bestow benefit upon them. And you should do the same. I just want to mention another person someone did not know, but the Kloisenberger Rebbe, who survived the Holocaust. I don't want to give a whole biographical session; it's not the time for it. But he moved he first moved to America, but then he moved to Israel. I think in the 1960s, he moved to Israel, And one of his great projects, which continues to flourish to this day, is the Laniado Hospital in Netanya. That hospital was built by the Kloisenberger Rebbe. And it was his response to the depravity and the brutality of the Nazis and what they did to him personally and to his family and to his Hasidim, to Klal Yisrael. His response was to build a hospital, to bestow benefit upon people, and not just spiritual benefit. I mean, a hospital is not primarily for anybody's spiritual benefit, it's for his personal physical well-being. And by the way, I mean, it goes without saying, the hospital is not limited to certain types of patients. It's for every person who is in need. That's the nature of a hospital, of a civilized hospital. But to me, it's a source of great inspiration that a person of such great spiritual and Torah stature should also devote his time and energies to building a hospital. That's kadosh, 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 v'lo chol haaretz kavoda. That's what Ksav Sofer says about v'yisem kedoshim. The way to be holy does not involve distancing oneself from interaction with other people. On the contrary, through engaging with other people therein, and through that path, a person can achieve and can aspire to holiness. Okay, so those are two different approaches to the idea of Kedoshim to you. Maybe we'll summarize it in one moment. I just have a few more minutes, which I'd like to just make bracha, baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam shehakol mi'edav, where he has a comment on another very well-known pasuk, one of the best-known verses in the entire Torah. I would say lahavdil, even in the wider world, this verse is very well known. I'm talking about chapter 19, verse 18. It's easy to remember. It's 19:18. And the pasuk is, V'havta l'reacha kamocha. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. If you're with me in the Stone Chumash, it's on page 660. Any Chumash that you have, it's chapter 19, verse 18. V'havta l'reacha kamocha. So, Ksav Sofer quotes the very well-known, I think maybe in the Rishalmi actually, Amar Rabbi Akiva, Ze klal gadol b'Torah. This is a fundamental principle of the Torah. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. It's like the fundamentals of the Torah. There's an echo of that, also very well known. Hillel said, "Madasani lach lechavercha lo sa'aved," but he explains derech drash, a beautiful drash about Ze klal gadol b'Torah. So the simple meaning is Rabbi Akiva is asserting that this pasuk, which is also a mitzvah min haTorah, it's not merely one of the mitzvahs of the Torah, but it's klal gadol b'Torah. It's the foundation of the Torah. Again, much has been written about that and what is the meaning of it. But Ksav Sofer proposes a different interpretation. He says that Ze klal gadol b'Torah means the way to acquire Torah is to ahavas reya. Ze klal gadol b'Torah, if a person aspires to study Torah, to learning Torah, to embracing Torah, to embody the teachings of the Torah, so you have to do it through ahavas reya, through loving your neighbor. It's reminiscent of what it says in Pirkei Avos about among the 48 ways through which the Torah is acquired, 48 ways to wisdom, as some people like to style it in that way. Torah ina Torah niknes ele b'chabura, dibuk chaverim, through interaction with other people. I don't mean just in the sense we spoke about a few minutes ago, but rather engaging in the process of Torah study together with others, with a chavrusa, with a chabura. Ein Torah niknis el b'chabura. The Torah can be grasped and can be acquired only with a group, with interaction with other people, through learning from others, through challenging others, through others challenging you, clarifying your thoughts, helping you to understand something which you couldn't understand, and you'll help him to understand something which he did not understand, and the two of you together will reach a deeper understanding of the subject. And that's true for a chavrus, and it's true for a group as well, ele b'chabura. And he says that certain other endeavors, I'm going to give my examples. I don't think he would have given quite these examples, Ksav Sofer, who died in 1871. but a person can be a day trader, typing away at his keyboard. He can be a software engineer. He can be in charge of tech support. He can do all of those things in isolation, remotely. Person can sit at home or can sit on the beach or wherever he may be, anywhere in the world, and he can do those things, and he can earn a living that way, maybe a good living, without interacting with other people. There are certain endeavors that don't require interaction with other people or engagement with other people. He says, Ze klal gadol b'Torah. When it comes to the Torah, says Rabbi Akiva, according to this interpretation, a person requires ahavas re'ah. He has to love people. He has to get along with people. He has to value the interaction and the relationship with another person and with people collectively in order to achieve greatness in Torah. And he doesn't say this, but I would add, it's not only Torah knowledge, but of course it's the Torah values, and it's the exemplifying the teachings of the Torah. When I was in yeshiva, I'm thinking a lot about my yeshiva days, because I just came back from New York 2 days ago. I was there for one day, and I went to a wedding, certain circumstances, and I saw a number of my chaverim from yeshiva who I hadn't seen, in some cases, in 40 years. That's a long time. I'm not saying we caught up entirely on the 40 years, but it took me back in the hour or 2 or 3 hours at the wedding. It took me back 40 years ago to my days in yeshiva, where we used to have Musar Vadin. A Vad is where you get together with other boys or men from the yeshiva, and one discloses, doesn't mean necessarily confidential events, but the challenges or the values or the achievements or the insights that he may have acquired in the past week. And through that exchange of ideas, through that intimate joining together in the quest for personal improvement, that is the Musar Va'ad idea that was introduced by Rabbi Salanta, and that can only be accomplished, says Ksav Sofer, following, or I would say, interpreting the teaching of Rabbi Akiva, Ze klal gadol b'Torah, ahavas re'ah. So just to sum up, we said Kedoshim Tihu. The first thing we said is the theory of relativity. In Parasha Shmini, the Torah says, be holy, don't be depraved like the nations of the world and eat the pigs and dogs and other things like that. So there it is, relative holiness. And here it's a higher level. It's absolute holiness, because here the Torah tells you, as Ramban explains, Kadesh atzmecha b'mutar, even that which is permitted to you, don't indulge, don't become a glutton, don't become depraved, don't be degenerate with the permission of the Torah. This is a higher level. That's why it's behakel, gathering together. That is to say, the Jewish people are considered in their own right, not really relative to other nations. A person can be relatively honest, or a person can be relatively successful, or a person can be relatively cautious or alert when it comes to Lashon Hara, but that is a basic level, possibly even damning with faint praise. A person should aspire to be all of those things in an absolute sense, not only a relative sense. Then we said that a person should pursue holiness, but not at the expense of his relationship with other people. On the contrary, it's through engaging with people, teaching them, being an example to them, being a source of support or encouragement or inspiration to others, that a person can achieve, or a person can pursue holiness. Holiness is like kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. Hashem is absolutely holy, but maloch chol haaretz kevodo, but he engages, so to speak, with human beings. And then lastly, we said just now, according to this drash, Rabbi Akiva is teaching us that the path to Torah achievement is via ahavas re'ah, through loving your fellow man. That is necessary to achieve and to acquire, to pursue eminence in Torah, it has to be through Ahavas Reah, through love of your fellow men. So thank you for joining us. I know we've done a bit of summary as well. So we've only scratched the surface of this fascinating Parsha, but we're constrained by 30 minutes on the Parsha. So thank you again to everyone, and I wish you a wonderful Shabbos.